Chapter 1. I will never forget that day in my previous life. The night before, I had stayed up late finishing a report. Taking advantage of the weekend, I slept in, woke up naturally, had breakfast, took a shower, and then lounged on the sofa with a face mask on, unwinding while watching TV shows. Out of nowhere, a violent pounding on the door startled me. When I opened it, a strong, middle-aged woman, accompanied by 3 other women of similar build, stormed in. Before I could even ask who they were, the lead woman aggressively grabbed my hair, ripped off my face mask, and shouted to the others, "No mistake, this is the slut who's been sleeping with my husband, Mr. Smith. We can't let her get away with this today." Without another word, she started slapping me, over and over, more than 10 times, across both sides of my face. I fought to break free, but the other women held me down, pinning me so firmly that I couldn't move. My face quickly swelled up, distorting with pain as my features contorted and my skin burned from the strikes. As someone who had been single for years and never had a boyfriend, I was not going to take this lying down. I managed to speak, struggling to form the words, "You've got the wrong person. I don't know anyone named Smith. Let me go." The woman ignored my pleas, pointing at me with fury and sneering, "Trying to deny it now? It's too late. Even if you turned to ashes, I'd still recognize you." She pulled up a photo on her phone and shoved it into my face. It was a picture of a young woman who looked eerily similar to me, dressed in a seductive lace nightgown, grinning provocatively at the camera, while leaning against a man who was clearly asleep beside her. I immediately recognized her as my younger sister, Emma. We shared such a striking resemblance that people who didn't know us well often mistook us for one another. My head buzzed with confusion. When had Emma gotten involved with a married man? Before I could say anything, the woman grabbed my chin, inspecting me with a sneer. "A mistress is still a mistress. Just because you're young and pretty, you think you can seduce men? You're just using what you've got. If your filth didn't affect me, I wouldn't care, but you had to provoke me. It's not just the photos, there are voice messages, too. Constantly pushing my patience. You really thought I'd just sit back and take it?" I tried to defend myself, I didn't. But she didn't even let me finish. Another slap landed on my face, hard enough to sting my skin. She glared at me with venom. "What a coward, can't even own up to what you've done. Don't worry, I've recorded everything." She played a voice recording from her phone, and my sister's mocking voice filled the air. "Auntie, you're pathetic. Mr. Smith says you're like a dead fish in bed, that you kill his desire. Unlike me, we go at it 5 or 6 times a night, and he can't get enough. Auntie, get a clue. Step aside. With your waist as thick as a barrel, Mr. Smith gets disgusted just looking at you. How could he still love you? Auntie, you got nothing on Valentine's Day, didn't you? Mr. Smith sent me a $520 red envelope. From now on, all his money will be spent on me." The recording continued, with Emma's taunts growing more and more vicious, inciting the woman's fury even more and driving her to escalate the violence. Chapter 2. I was beaten until my mouth was full of blood, my eyes swollen shut, barely able to open a slit. The woman then threw a pregnancy test at my face, sneering, "You manipulative mistress. You thought you could secure your position by leaving this in his car for me to find, huh? Do you really think a child will make you untouchable?" Her friends, equally furious, grabbed my hair and began hitting me again. "You filthy whore, thinking you could use a baby to push your way into the family. Who gave you the audacity? You sly fox, seducing my friend's husband. Let's see how arrogant you are once that baby is gone." One of the women, wearing high heels, jumped onto me, kicking my stomach with all her might. The others followed suit, relentlessly kicking and punching my abdomen. My internal organs felt like they were being shredded. The pain was so intense, I thought I might break in half, and I cried out in agony. But they would be disappointed, there was no child inside me. The woman looked down at me with a cruel sneer. "So, the little bastard is tough, huh? Not coming out, are you?" I barely managed to croak, "I'm not pregnant." I'm not the mistress. Please, just let me go." Her anger only deepened. "Not pregnant, and still you dared to use a pregnancy test to deceive me? You're truly reckless, pushing my limits again and again. Don't think for a second I'll let you off the hook." They ignored every word I said, continuing to beat me for hours until I passed out from the pain. When I finally regained consciousness, I was lying on the cold floor, hoping the nightmare was over. But when I opened my eyes, I saw Emma standing nearby, scrutinizing me coldly. I didn't have the energy to ask why she had caused all this chaos and made me take the fall for her affair. Instead, I begged her to take me to the hospital. She clicked her tongue, clearly displeased. "Looks like that woman didn't do a good enough job. This wasn't painful enough to make her suffer. I'll have to handle things myself. Dear sister, for my future happiness, I'm afraid you'll need to sacrifice a little more." Before I could even process her words, she grabbed my head and slammed it into the floor, over and over, with such force that I thought my skull might crack. I lost consciousness again. Chapter 3. When I woke up, it was a week later. Emma had reported the incident to the police, providing evidence that the woman, Linda Brown, had led the assault against me. She had secretly installed cameras in my house, recording the brutal scene of Linda and her friends breaking in and attacking me. After I was hospitalized, doctors diagnosed me with permanent brain damage, and it was determined that I would be bedridden for the rest of my life. Emma, as my family member, refused any settlement and demanded that Linda be severely punished. In the end, Linda was sentenced to 3 years in prison for breaking and entering and intentional injury, with undeniable evidence against her. She was also ordered to pay $80,000 in compensation. Her 3 friends, hoping to avoid prison time, each paid an additional $30,000 to me. The total compensation of $170,000 went straight into Emma's pocket. Despite being the actual victim, I saw no benefit, while Emma, the true instigator, reaped all the rewards. With Linda imprisoned, Emma successfully married Mr. Smith, securing her position. As for me, now a useless burden, paralyzed and bedridden, she naturally refused to continue supporting me. She claimed she was transferring me to the best care, moving me to a private hospital. But when no one was around, she unplugged my oxygen tank, leaned in close to whisper in my ear, "Dear Eliana, don't blame me. You were always destined to be unwanted, to die alone. It's better to join our foolish mother. I'll take care of the family fortune." I stared at the sister I had always loved and cared for, unable to believe that she could betray me like this. I died with hatred and regret. Emma inherited everything I had worked so hard to build and lived a carefree, luxurious life. I never imagined I would get a second chance. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to the day before Linda's visit. Seeing Emma in the shower, I silently took her phone, unlocked it using her birthday as the passcode, and quickly took screenshots of crucial information. I sent the screenshots to my WeChat account before deleting all evidence from her phone. I carefully returned the phone to its original place, just before she came out. This time, I would make sure all her schemes fell apart. Chapter 4. The weekend arrived, bringing with it that day, the one I could never forget from my previous life. I played my part perfectly, just as I had planned. After a long shower, I curled up on the couch, watching a drama series. On the surface, everything seemed normal. But just as expected, the peace shattered with loud, angry banging on the door. Rising with an annoyed sigh, I made my way to the door and opened it. Linda barged in without hesitation, her 3 equally furious friends trailing behind her like a storm about to wreak havoc. Startled, I stepped back and shouted, "Who are you people? What do you think you're doing breaking into my house?" Linda's eyes narrowed as she ripped the sheet mask off my face, scrutinizing me with a mixture of disdain and rage. No mistake. This is her, the little tramp messing around with my husband. Ladies, let's show her what happens when you cross me. Before I could react, she grabbed my collar and yanked me out onto the balcony. The first slap landed hard across my cheek, the sharp sound echoing in the air. Then came another. Just like in my previous life, they didn't stop. The four of them took turns unleashing their fury, beating me until I felt like every bone in my body was about to shatter. Blow after blow, their torment stretched on for what felt like hours until I finally blacked out. When I came to, the first thing I saw was Emma crouching beside me, her expression unreadable as she looked me over. "Emma, help me." I croaked weakly, barely able to speak. "I need to go to the hospital." Her lips curled into a cruel smile. Instead of helping, she grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked my head back. "Linda and her friends didn't hit you hard enough," she sneered. Just as she raised my head, clearly intending to slam it into the floor, she froze. Her hands trembled, and her face paled as she looked behind her. Her voice came out as a shaky whisper. What are you doing here?" Following her gaze, I turned to see Linda standing in the doorway, her arms crossed. Behind her were her three brawny, hot-tempered friends, all of them glaring daggers at Emma. I pushed myself up from the floor, slowly and deliberately. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out a damp tissue and wiped away the fake blood smeared around my mouth, as well as the carefully painted bruises on my face. This scene left Emma utterly stunned, her wide eyes filled with disbelief. For a long moment, she just stood there, unable to process what had just happened. She probably never imagined, not in her wildest dreams, that her carefully laid trap would fail so spectacularly. What she didn't know was that I had already gone to Linda and revealed who I really was. It all started when I found Linda's contact on Emma's phone. Without hesitation, I added her and introduced myself, arranging to meet her face to face. The moment Linda saw me, her expression turned suspicious. It wasn't surprising, my resemblance to Emma was undeniable. She immediately assumed I was there to provoke her, thinking I was Emma trying to escalate things. Her infamous temper flared, and she looked ready to make her move. But I came prepared. With just one carefully calculated move, I shattered her doubts and completely turned the situation in my favor. Chapter 5. How do I know you're not just another mistress trying to cover your tracks? Linda had demanded when we met. In response, I placed a photo of Emma and me on the table between us. "The woman you're after is my sister, Emma," I began. "I'm Eliana, her older sister. We're only 2 years apart, and people often say we look like twins. Even our father sometimes has trouble telling us apart. But there's one key difference between us." Linda raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced but intrigued enough to listen. "Emma? She's got plenty of experience with relationships, especially with older men, your husband included." "Me?" I leaned forward slightly, meeting her gaze head-on. "I've never even been in a relationship before. I've been single my whole life. Hell, even the mosquitoes that buzz around me are female. If you're still not convinced, I'd be happy to go to a doctor with you and prove I'm still a virgin." Linda studied me closely, her skepticism giving way to a flicker of doubt. "Even if you're not the mistress, you're her sister. So why are you here, throwing her under the bus? What's your angle?" Her words didn't surprise me. Given what Emma had done to her, it was only natural for her to assume I wasn't much better. I took a deep breath and explained. "Tomorrow, Emma is going to message you. She'll taunt you and accidentally leak her location, knowing it'll provoke you into coming after her. She wants you to confront her, but she's planning to pin everything on me. She's setting me up as the scapegoat." Linda's expression darkened as she leaned back, processing my words. "But if my dear sister is so eager to betray me," I added coldly, "you can bet I'm not going to sit back and take it." Linda was no fool. It didn't take her long to connect the dots. I saw the tension in her shoulders ease as her suspicions toward me waned. I laid out my plan and asked for her cooperation. It didn't take much to convince her. After all, this was the perfect opportunity for her to get to the bottom of everything. Emma and I lived under the same roof, so I knew her habits better than anyone. In my previous life, I had discovered, too late, that she had secretly installed a hidden camera in the living room clock. Her goal? To capture footage of Linda assaulting me so she could use it as blackmail later. I was certain Emma would be hiding somewhere nearby, watching everything unfold. She'd wait until Linda had left me battered and broken before swooping in to check on me. But there was one flaw in her plan: the balcony was a blind spot for the camera. That worked to my advantage. Standing on the balcony, I let out gut-wrenching screams, making sure they sounded as convincing as possible. I even added the occasional crash for dramatic effect. Meanwhile, I sat comfortably, sipping on a cold drink and applying makeup to create realistic-looking bruises. Hours later, Linda dragged my battered body back into the living room. Blood pooled on the floor, actually fake blood I had prepared in advance. Before leaving, Linda delivered a perfectly cutting line for Emma's benefit. "You shameless tramp. Try crossing me again, and I'll make sure you disappear for good." With that, she and her friend stormed out, slamming the door behind them. Of course, they didn't actually leave. They hung around at a nearby cafe, waiting for the next phase of the plan. Sure enough, not long after, Emma crept back into the apartment, thinking the coast was clear. Linda and her friends followed right behind her, bursting through the door just as Emma stepped inside. This time, there was no way for her to wriggle out of it. She was caught red-handed as the real mistress. Chapter 6. I told Linda one thing before she left: whatever she planned to do, it couldn't happen inside my home. But once they stepped outside, she was free to handle things however she wanted. Linda didn't hesitate. She pulled up Emma's shirt, exposing her swollen belly, a bump that made it clear she was already 2 or 3 months pregnant. Any lingering doubts about who the real mistress was disappeared in an instant. With a deceptively casual smile, Linda slipped her arm around Emma's, but her true intentions were far from friendly. Beneath the gesture of camaraderie, she pressed the cold edge of a spring-loaded knife against Emma's side. "Don't scream. Don't resist. Just walk out with us quietly, and no one has to get hurt." Emma froze, panic flickering across her face. She wasn't stupid, she knew that going with them would only lead to disaster. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed to the floor, turning to me with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Please. I know I was wrong. I can't go with them, please, I'm begging you. Think of me, think of my baby. Help us." But her tears meant nothing to me. All I could see was the Emma from my past life, the one who held me down and bashed my head onto the floor without a shred of mercy, her face twisted into a mask of pure rage. Those memories burned in my mind. The pain, the betrayal, the realization that the person I called my sister could be so cruel. That day, with every blow she delivered, she didn't just break my body, she shattered the bond we once shared. There was no forgiveness left in me. I stood there, cold and unmoving, her cries sliding right off me like water off the stone. Linda, clearly running out of patience, tightened her grip and pinched Emma's waist hard enough to make her yelp. "Keep stalling, and I'll cut your damn tongue out," she snapped. The threat worked. Emma's sobs turned to quiet whimpers as she let Linda drag her to her feet. She followed meekly, her head bowed in defeat, her body trembling. As they were leaving, Linda turned back to me, giving my shoulder a firm pat. "Thanks for this, girl. You've been great to work with. Honestly, I didn't expect you to be this smart, or this ruthless. From now on, we're friends. If you ever need anything, just let me know." I gave her a small nod, watching silently as they disappeared down the hallway. And just like that, the nightmare of my past life was finally over. But even as I stood there, a strange heaviness lingered in my chest. The physical pain Linda had inflicted on me in my last life? That I could handle. Bruises heal, wounds fade, and the body always finds a way to recover. What stayed with me, the thing that hurt far more than anything Linda could have done, was Emma. She was my sister, my blood. And yet, she had betrayed me so thoroughly, so deliberately, that I could no longer recognize the person she once was. Chapter 7. Our mother died because of my father's mistress. She wasn't just some shadowy figure lurking in the background, no, she marched right up to our house, pregnant and demanding that my mother leave. Before all that, my mom had a good life. She worked as a clerk at a state-owned company, a steady job that gave her purpose. But everything changed after Emma was born. Emma had been sickly from the start, constantly in and out of the hospital. With no one else to help, our grandparents were too old to take care of a baby. She had no choice but to quit her job and stay home. For my father, this was the beginning of the end. He already held a grudge against her for not giving him a son, and now he saw her as nothing more than a burden. When he was home, he'd nitpick every little thing she did, picking fights just to make her feel small. But most of the time, he wasn't around. He was too busy with work, which I later realized meant spending time with his mistress. Oddly enough, I didn't mind when he was gone. Without him, the house felt peaceful, like a little oasis where it was just the three of us, me, Emma, and Mom. But the moment he came home, that peace shattered. He would yell, slam doors, and turn the house upside down with his temper. And then came the day when everything fell apart. One afternoon, his mistress showed up at our door, her pregnant belly on full display. She demanded my mom divorce him and make room for her. My father didn't try to stop her. In fact, he stood there, silently backing her up. He even told my mom to hurry up and file the divorce papers. My mom was a traditional woman. To her, family was sacred, the cornerstone of everything she believed in. For her husband to betray her like that, to bring another woman into her life and humiliate her so openly, it was too much. Her world crumbled. A few days later, she made her decision. She drank pesticide. I was there in her final moments. She clutched my hand so tightly it hurt, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I wasn't strong enough. I couldn't keep your father's heart." Her voice broke as she made me promise to take care of Emma. "She's so small. She needs you. Please, don't let her suffer." I was just a little girl, barely old enough to understand what was happening. But I nodded through my tears, promising her the one thing I could, that I would protect Emma, no matter what. And then she was gone. We hadn't even finished mourning her, her grave still fresh, her memory still raw, when my father brought the mistress into our home. He married her as quickly as he could, eager to start his new life. Within a year, they had a son, the boy he had always wanted. I hated my stepmother with every ounce of my being. In my eyes, she was the reason my mother was dead. The reason my family had been torn apart. But I was old enough to see the truth. With her arrival, my father's already limited attention shifted entirely to his new family. Emma and I became little more than ghosts in our own home. His world revolved around them, his wife and their precious son. We were just leftovers, barely worth a passing thought. If it weren't for our grandparents and uncles on my mom's side, we wouldn't have made it. They paid for our school fees and helped us when they could, but every visit to ask for money felt like a battle I had to fight alone. At home, I took on everything. Cooking, cleaning, and making sure Emma had something to eat. It wasn't much, but it was enough to scrape by. By the time I hit middle school, I realized that if I didn't step up, there wouldn't be a future for us. On weekends and holidays, I started collecting bottles and scrap metal to sell. It wasn't glamorous, but every penny I earned went into a secret stash. I knew my father and stepmother wouldn't lift a finger to help us with high school. One weekend, I spent the entire day scavenging. I walked for miles, scouring every alley and street corner, dragging a bag full of bottles behind me. By the time I got back, the sun was already low in the sky, and I was exhausted. As I stepped into the yard, I saw Emma curled up in the corner, her face streaked with tears. Her leg was bruised and swollen. The skin scraped raw. She sat there hugging her knees, sobbing quietly to herself as though the world had forgotten her. Chapter 8. Dad had taken stepmom and our half-brother to an amusement park, leaving Emma alone. Stepmom hadn't left any food and hid everything high up, afraid Emma would steal it. Desperate with hunger, Emma had climbed on a chair to reach the cookies in the cupboard, only to fall and hurt herself. I was furious and, out of spite, went to stepmom's room and cut up her and my half-brother's clothes. This, of course, caused an uproar. When they returned and discovered what I had done, Dad beat me severely, forcing me to apologize to stepmom and my half-brother, or he would kick us out. I was stubborn, having endured enough humiliation. Why should I apologize to the woman who caused Mom's death? But my defiance meant Dad didn't kick us out, though he only gave us one meal a day and moved our beds to the cramped, cold balcony, filled with junk and laundry. We were treated like garbage, excluded from the family. Emma often watched enviously from the balcony as Dad and stepmom doted on our half-brother, feeding him snacks. It broke my heart, and I vowed to succeed and buy a big house for us, giving Emma everything she lacked. I pushed myself to the limit, studying and working hard, getting into the best high school in the city. Stepmom refused to pay my tuition, so I relied on school subsidies and my savings to finish high school and attend a top university, funding my education with student loans and part-time jobs. Emma wasn't as academically inclined. After middle school, Dad didn't want to pay for her education. I insisted she attend high school, paying her tuition and encouraging her to go to college. But she had lost interest in studying, barely getting into a third-rate college. Fortunately, by then, I had made my first significant earnings from social media, enough to support her expenses, which far exceeded her classmates. To Dad and stepmom, I pretended to be poor. After graduation, I cut ties with them. I moved to a new city with Emma, focusing on my career and starting a new company, while she indulged in a life of leisure, relying on me to cover her expenses. Little did I know I was raising an ungrateful wolf. This time, I wouldn't let her take advantage of me. Chapter 9. A week later, a pale and weak Emma showed up at my door, but I had changed the lock code, so she couldn't get in. She cried at the door, "Sis, that woman blindfolded me and took me to a shady clinic. They not only aborted my baby, but also removed my uterus. I have no evidence to report them. Mr. Smith avoids me now that I can't have children. I'm penniless. If you don't take me in, I'll be homeless." I spoke through the door, "You chose this path. As a mistress, you must face the consequences. You're an adult now. I'm your sister, not your mother. I have no obligation to support you. Your fate is no longer my concern." She knelt, "Sis, I don't believe you're so heartless. Please, come out and see me. I didn't know that woman would find you. Please forgive me." I firmly replied, "No. Some mistakes can't be forgiven. If you keep causing trouble, I'll call security to throw you out." Her voice turned desperate. "Don't you remember Mom's dying wish for you to take care of me?" Her mention of Mom only fueled my anger. If you truly cared about Mom, why did you do the very thing she despised the most? It's her fault for not keeping Dad's heart, making us suffer. I just wanted to change my fate. I couldn't accept her twisted logic. "Your idea of changing fate is being a homewrecker?" She persisted. "He really loved me. He promised to marry me if I gave him a son. I was so close to succeeding. That woman ruined everything. And you, as my sister, should have supported me. How could you betray me?" I coldly replied, "Having a sister like you is my shame. You clearly never cared about Mom's death. You're no different from stepmom. I should never have helped you." Her anger flared. "Who needed your help? You claimed to stand up for me, but only made stepmom hate us more, making us live on the balcony." Chapter 10. Since that's how you feel, go find them and let them take you in. I called the property management and reported someone causing a disturbance at my door, asking them to send security to remove her. Security arrived quickly and escorted Emma away. She screamed in rage, "Eliana, you're just as bad as that old woman. You've ruined me, but you won't get away with it. I'll be back for you." I knew she wouldn't give up easily, but she was at the end of her rope. There wasn't much she could do. A month passed without incident, and I began to relax. Just as I let my guard down, Emma showed up at my office building after work, bringing our father and stepmother with her. They had never stopped looking for me, but I had cut off all contact with family, making it impossible for them to find me. Seeing me, their eyes lit up like they had found a goldmine. Stepmom, wiping away fake tears, grabbed my arm. "Eliana, we've missed you so much. How could you be so heartless, not contacting us all these years? I'm not your real mother, but your father and brother are your blood. Don't you care about them at all? I heard you started your own company and became a big boss. Are you too good for us now?" Emma, hiding behind stepmom, smirked triumphantly. But I was prepared. I pulled out a document from my bag and handed it to stepmom. "Auntie, my small company wasn't doing well, so I just sold it. Here's the transfer contract. You can see for yourself." Then I showed them a stack of IOUs. "These are my debts, totaling over 2 million. I didn't contact you because I didn't want to drag you into this. The debt collectors are looking for my family. Since you're here, let's go to my place and discuss how you can help me pay off my debts." Dad and stepmom looked at me in disbelief, then turned to Emma for confirmation. Emma shouted, "Dad, stepmom, don't believe her. She has plenty of money. Her company makes millions in profit every year, and she bought a big house. These are fake documents to trick you." I shrugged. "I sold the house to pay off debts. If you don't believe me, you can check." I had anticipated this, so after my rebirth, I started handling my company and property matters. Since my business was in social media, I could work from anywhere. A competitor was interested in buying my company, so I sold it. I also listed my house with an agent, pricing it slightly below market value, and it sold quickly. I had also contacted Linda, who ran a loan business, and she helped me create the loan contracts and IOUs. Emma didn't believe me and took Dad and stepmom to my former house. She asked me to open the door, so I knocked. A middle-aged man answered, asking who we were. Emma accused him of being a fake and demanded to see his property deed. The man frowned, calling her crazy. I quickly explained that she was my sister and didn't believe I had sold the house, asking him to show the deed. Recognizing me as the previous owner, he obliged, showing the deed with his name on it. Seeing the deed, they had no more arguments. I then took them to my temporary rental, an old, run-down apartment. Chapter 11. Before we reached the door, we saw 2 burly men about to splash chicken blood on it. Seeing me, they raised their fists. "You better pay up, woman." I quickly tried to appease them. "Please, give me some time. My parents are here to help. I'll pay you back soon." One of the men glared at Dad, who immediately cowered behind me, trembling. "You have 1 week to pay up, or your parents will be on our list too." The men left, having achieved their goal of intimidation. Inside the apartment, the smell of mold hit us. Stepmom covered her nose, Dad coughed, and Emma was too shocked to speak. I said, "Dad, Auntie, you see my situation. After selling the house, I still owe about 50,000. Can you help me out?" Stepmom's face changed. "We don't have money. Your brother is getting married, and we need money for the dowry and house." Emma glared at me, suggesting, "Why not arrange a good marriage for Emma? The dowry could help buy a house for our brother." I shrugged. I'd be willing to marry, but who would take me with debt collectors at my door? The dowry would go straight to paying my debts. Emma, on the other hand, could fetch a good price. Dad and stepmom looked at Emma. Emma turned pale. "I can't. I had surgery and can't have children. I'm not worth anything. Emma is still a virgin. She can get a better price." How amusing, treating me like merchandise. I decided to push her further. I said sadly, "The debt collectors said if I can't pay, they'll force me into prostitution. If you help me pay off the debt, I'll do anything." Dad's face darkened, clearly thinking it wasn't worth paying my debt. Stepmom whispered in his ear, "Emma should marry. We can find a matchmaker to send her far away." Emma, realizing her plan backfired, panicked, "If I marry and can't have children, my in-laws will kill me. I'll sell myself, to save money for our brother." Stepmom tried to soothe her. "We know you're sensible, but that would take too long. Just listen to us. Let's go. Eliana, stay here and pay your debts. Don't drag us into it. They left, dragging Emma with them, ignoring her protests. I watched them leave. Once they were gone, I locked the door and left. This was just a temporary rental to mislead them. I wouldn't see them again. Chapter 12. 2 years later, I heard news about Emma. My company was thriving, and I was on vacation in Hawaii, enjoying the sun, when I received a call from Emma. Life had been so good, I had almost forgotten about her. Sis, please save me. Dad and stepmom sold me to a remote village. They found out I can't have children and are going to lock me in a pigsty, forcing me to serve the men in the village. I can't survive. I felt no sympathy, call the police. She sobbed, I did, but the local police won't help. It's too backward here. Please give Dad and stepmom money to find out where I am and get me out. I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have schemed against you. Only you and Mom truly cared for me. Please, have mercy. If I stay here, I'll die. I pretended to hesitate. It's not that I don't want to help, but I'm still in debt. My phone is dying. You should find another way. Good luck. I hung up before she could respond. No way was I going to be a fool again. 6 months later, shocking news came from home. Emma had escaped the village and returned to Dad and stepmom's house to steal money. They caught her and tried to sell her to an even more remote area. In a fit of rage, she stabbed them to death, took the money, and fled. She was soon caught, muttering about killing me. But I had moved to a new city, making it impossible for her to find me. Emma was sentenced to death and executed, finally disappearing from my life. I continued my carefree single life, enjoying every moment. The nightmares of the past were far behind me. Tomorrow would be a new day.